Greetings, my beautiful lovelies. It's Emmy. Welcome back to another episode of Fermented, where I explore foods and recipes that are fermented. Today's video is sponsored by HelloFresh. Get started with 6 free meals. That's 2 free meals with each of your first 3 boxes. Go to HelloFresh.com and enter Emmy60 to receive a total of $60 off. Big thanks to HelloFresh. And today I'm going to be making sourdough focaccia. If you're not familiar with focaccia, it's a beautiful, fluffy, slightly chewy bread that's oily and sometimes crisp. Absolutely delicious and fantastic, but I've never had a sourdough version. Now, I started this jar of sourdough right here back when I was doing my petulepa video, where I made traditional Finnish bread called petulepa that uses pine bark and sourdough. And basically what a sourdough starter is, it's a culture that has yeast in it. It creates CO2 bubbles, which create the air pockets in your bread and leavens your bread. This is what people used before commercial yeast was available. So besides also adding some leavening, sourdough also gives, of course, a sour flavor, which I absolutely love. Also, because the sourdough is breaking down the flour and consuming it to create the CO2 gases, it's partly digested and makes it a little bit easier for some people to digest. Now, I found this recipe from King Arthur Flour. I will put the link down below in case you're interested. Here is my dough that has been fermenting, and now let me walk you through the steps of how I got here. We're going to take 1.5 cups of fed sourdough starter. Now, what does fed mean? Well, to keep this alive, we need to feed it. So 1/4 cup of flour, 1/4 cup of water, mix it in there once a week, and then once a week I remove half of the starter mixture. I'll use it for a recipe and then replenish it with, again, equal amounts of flour and water. Another thing, if you do a lot of baking, you can keep your starter at room temperature, just on your counter, but you'll have to feed it more often, once or twice a day, because they'll start nibbling everything up and then they'll starve if you don't continue to feed it. But that's if you bake a lot. I bake maybe once a week at this point. So I keep mine in the fridge and I feed it once a week. So I'm going to be using my stand mixer today. You certainly don't need one. You can do this all by hand, but the kneading process will take a little bit longer. Okay, so either in a large bowl or the bowl of your stand mixer, you're going to put your 1.5 cups of starter along with 1.5 cups of lukewarm water. If you decide to use AP flour, you're going to reduce the amount of water by 1/4 cup. So give this a mix to dissolve the starter completely. Now we're going to add 6 cups of flour. I'm using bread flour. 1 tablespoon of instant yeast, 1 tablespoon of salt, 6 tablespoons of olive oil. We're going to add 2 tablespoons of honey. This is honey that came out of my own hives. So now we're going to mix everything together with a paddle attachment, and then once it starts to form a dough, it's pretty stiff, you're going to switch out and use a hook attachment. If you're not using a stand mixer, this is when you would be using some elbow grease. And now we're going to knead the dough. If you're using a stand mixer, it's going to be about 5 to 7 minutes. If you're kneading by hand, it's going to take about 15 minutes. And we're just going to work the dough, kneading it until it becomes nice and smooth. And it'll be very, very elastic because we're using flours with a lot more gluten in them. So once our dough is formed, we're going to take a bowl and lightly oil it with some olive oil and roll the dough in the oil and then flip it over. So we're going to let this rise for 1 hour. So for this recipe, I tested out a proofer that I got. And what it does is it maintains the temperature and the humidity around 80 degrees, which is ideal for yeast to grow. And I placed my bowl in there. So after about an hour, in my case it was 45 minutes, you can take the dough and fold it over 3 or 4 times. If you follow my Insta story, you know I was up late making this sourdough. It was about 11 o'clock and I was ready for bed. So I increased the temperature to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. And in a half an hour, my dough doubled. You're gonna take a large baking sheet, this is called a half sheet, dump the dough out and turn it over and make sure there's oil on both sides. And then gently stretch it so it fits all corners of the pan. And then we're going to wrap it in some plastic wrap, and then we're going to place it in the refrigerator, and we're going to allow this to have a long overnight fermentation. And now this is what we have right here. Next, we're going to use our impeccably clean hands, and we're going to dimple the surface of the focaccia. So I just recently watched episode 1 of Samin Nosrat's new series on Netflix. This focaccia expert used his fingers and just dimpled the focaccia dough so beautifully, and he just pressed ever so lightly like this. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty satisfying. Wonk, wonk, wonk. Now we're gonna take some olive oil and just drizzle it all over. They said about 2 tablespoons, but I'm just gonna, you know, Now we're gonna take some flake salt. I'm just using kosher salt because that's what I've got. And give it a good sprinkling. So now we're gonna place this in our cracking hot oven for 20 to 25 minutes until it turns golden brown. And then we will eat it. Okay, bye-bye. Alrighty, so while the bread is baking, let me tell you a little bit more about HelloFresh. HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit. It brings food right to your doorsteps. Everything is pre-measured. You just have to do a little bit of prep work, and the meals come together in about 30 minutes. So there are a lot of things to like about HelloFresh. You can get out of recipe ruts. You can try new ingredients. HelloFresh meals are now priced from $6.99 a serving. Another thing I like is you won't have to buy an ingredient that you'll never use again, and you can tailor your meals by switching between the classic, family, and veggie. Get started with 6 meals free. That's 2 meals with each of your first 3 boxes. Go to HelloFresh.com and enter the code EMMY60 to receive a total of $60 off. Big thanks to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video. Now let's check on the bread. Bum, 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 bum. Look at this. Isn't this absolutely gorgeous? I have a half-sheet pan of focaccia and it is gorgeous. It smells so good. Oh my word. There's nothing like the smell of freshly baked bread in your house. It's just so cozy. And now that we're coming into winter here in New England, I've been doing a lot of baking. I'm gonna cut this right in half. And there it is. The bottom is golden, the top is golden. All right, let's give this a taste. Itadakimasu. So good. Simultaneously soft and tender, yet slightly chewy because we use bread flour. Look, you can see it kind of have that bit of a chew. And it has this wonderful richness from the addition of the olive oil, both in the dough, but also drizzled on top. Like that bite, It makes it nutty and rich, but it doesn't feel decadent. Kind of like butter, but more kind of infused in the bread itself. And the sourdough, while present, is not at all overpowering. It's just in there a little bit. You get this little tinge of sourness in it, just ever so slightly. I would recommend, if you make this recipe, do not be afraid of the salt. Add plenty of salt because the dough can handle it and it just tastes so good with it. That little edgy piece reminds me a little bit of Greek style pizza, where it's a little bit buttery, a little bit crisp, definitely enriched and fluffy. I should mention that the original recipe includes a spread of ricotta cheese that's sweetened with honey, but I just wanted straight up plain focaccia, so that's what I made here. I think this would be marvelous topped with tomatoes, basil, any kind of cheese. This is just begging for some kind of savory accompaniment, although sweetness would be nice as well. So good. So there you have it, a recipe for sourdough focaccia that you can make at home. Make this recipe with the sourdough. You will not be disappointed. Big thanks to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video. Get started with 6 free meals. That's 2 free meals with each of your first 3 boxes. Go to HelloFresh.com and enter EMMY60 to receive a total of $60 off. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. I hope you guys learned something. Please share this video with your friends. Follow me on social media, and I shall see you in the next video. Hello, take care. Bye!